Okay, and we are live. What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and I want to thank everyone for waiting through some brief technical difficulties. It doesn't matter how long I do this stuff, I can never figure it out. I wish I could say it's not going to happen again. It probably will. Always count on me being late when it comes to stream. Anyway, I want to say thank you for joining us, everybody, and we are joined by Pratush Badiga. Pratt, welcome to the stream.
I'm glad to be here.
So let's kick things off because I think there's a subject that we were going to talk about last week, and I remember texting you during the one drop, and I said, "Look, Pratt, you can't win every tournament that you play. Like you have to set the bar low. You're not going to win very often. It's not likely you win when you play a tournament. There are a lot of people in the tournament. You have to pretend you have to take all hope away. But look, I'm playing day 2 of the one drop. I'll call you later." And then I won the one drop, so it just didn't have that same feel to it when I'm like, look, man, you can't win the tournaments.
Yeah, I know that. Like, it didn't really ring true. Like, I didn't feel the pain coming from you as much as it should have. So, but no, I'm really happy you won. Of course, that was awesome to watch. So,
thanks, man. Yeah, it was definitely an honor. It's still surreal to me because like the whole tournament, I was never like really short. I was never like short stacking it up. But the thing is, like compared to average chips, but the average stack was like a relatively low amount of big blinds. So I was pretty continuously like, okay, I've got 18 blinds, I've got 15 blinds, I've got 23 blinds. It never really felt like, wow, I might win this until that like rush where like a bunch of people busted all at the same time. So yeah, it still doesn't really feel real to me.
yeah. It was an interesting final table because it just seemed like chips were just going back and forth between players. No one was just running away with it and crushing the table. It just seemed like someone would run all in and double up, and then the other person would. And yeah, I think those are the ones where you never feel like you're gonna win, or you just don't know. You're just like, okay, I'm gonna just get all in and see what happens. So yeah, I think that the structure was definitely not as good as some of the other tournaments, so obviously that hurt a little bit. So
yeah, the mindset is very different. I think when you come in and you're the chip leader, right? Like if you come into a final table and you're first in chips, what you're thinking about is closing it out. You're like, I can actually win this. When you come in and you have like a little under average chips, you're like, well, we're gonna make some moves. We're gonna see what we can do. But like, your expectations are so much lower because there's 8 other people still. You realize you have a shot at it, but it doesn't really feel as much, I guess, like what you're expecting from to happen. But let's
it's like it's all gravy if you like get a double up and then get a few pay jumps. If you come in 7 of 7, you get 5th. You're like, wow, that was awesome. If you're coming 1 of 7, and you get 3rd, you're still kind of feeling like, oh, like what happened, But
exactly. So let's go ahead. Let's actually talk about the Super High Roller Bowl for you because I obviously was in the tournament. I managed to punt most of my chips off on day 2, so I didn't have the pain and suffering of going deep and bubbling or min cashing or any of that stuff. I got right out of there early, which was if you're gonna bust, why not do it earlier?
It reduces the pain. It's always a good strategy. That's usually my strategy in 1500s. Be out in 2 hours and enjoy the rest of my day in Vegas.
That sounds like good, solid, fundamental poker strategy there. But anyway, so you went deep. What was the experience like in the Super High Roller Bowl going deep? Was it fun? Did you enjoy it? What was the final table like? Did you feel like, what was it like? What was that experience like for you?
I mean, honestly, up until I busted, it was the best experience in a tournament I've ever had because it was just so much fun. I mean, it's just really fun to play in that kind of environment where you're competing against the best players in the world, and really having to think about every spot. I think some people might have seen that Negreanu on Twitter was talking about how he was always with regs at every table, and that was my tables as well. I was basically almost always playing with him, and just playing with a lot of regs, it was just like really good. It was like a really fun test, and I felt like I was completely locked in the whole tournament. Every day I wasn't looking at my phone during the tournament. I wasn't just being distracted by talking to people on Facebook or whatever. And I just felt about as in the zone as I've ever felt. And so it was really fun to get really deep in that tournament. And, I think that's probably one of the things that ended up being kind of frustrating later is because, it felt like one of the best tournaments I've ever played just from beginning to end. And I felt like I played really well and it was really fun. But then obviously, things got kind of interesting, I guess, at the final table.
So when you talk about like getting in the zone, I feel like I do things a little bit differently than you do when when we're deep in a tournament. I feel like when I'm in a tournament, I'm like doing lots of things. I'm taking pictures. I'm like chatting with people. I'm like hanging out. I'm like telling some jokes. So like I feel like for me, when I'm deep in a tournament, I guess like I don't really feel like a difference between like being like in the zone or not in the zone. I just
Right.
kind of like when it gets to me, I analyze factors and I try and make my best decision. Now, obviously when you're trying to do a lot of things, it can be a little bit harder sometimes to like make close decisions. But the point still remains like whenever it gets to me, I just try and like get right into it. Like, what do I have? What's my range I'm going to create look like? What's the situation like? But I feel like when you play a tournament, you are just like phone off. I'm here to play the tournament. I'm in the zone. I'm focusing. I'm going to watch every hand. I'm going to see what that guy's up to. I'm going to see what that guy's up to. That guy had King 10, and you like really focus. And maybe that's actually one of the reasons why I think, I think you have a very good grasp on what like tournament players are doing in situations. Like
Yeah.
I see you constantly like we'll be like hanging out and you're like, oh man, this guy always has King Jack here. And I'm just like, what? I mean, sure, you can have King Jack here. He's like, no, King Jack. This is King Jack. And it goes to showdown, the guy's King Jack. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, not nice to have some superpowers if you have a very good idea of like what tournament players are doing. So I think it's good to focus on those things. But do you feel like maybe it sets the bar like a little high for yourself? And you're like, all right, I'm in the zone. Like, okay, so what? You cash like 22% of the time?
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely some trade-offs there. I think in the higher buy-in events, I definitely make sure to try to be in the zone as well, because I'm also like, playing with other people, some investors' money and things like that, which definitely sort of like puts like a little bit of additional, responsibility, quote unquote, I guess. But, just in the high buy-in tournaments, I definitely try to stay in the zone. I think also some of it just has to do with personality type, where I think being a little bit more introverted, talking to people and all that, it takes a little more energy out of me. So just, I think that, if I was posing for pictures and, chatting it up with everyone, it would be an extra drain of energy more than even just the distraction part, where I'd feel probably like more tired towards the end of the day and things like that, just because it just takes a little bit more out of me. I definitely think that, I think you kind of have to figure out what works for you. For me, I really like when I'm, super focused like that. And I think it takes me to a little bit higher of, I think there's definitely some close spots where I kind of figure out what people are doing, how they're acting. And I think paying attention, especially if you're kind of a newer player and you haven't played as much, it just helps you get a lot more information. So I think it's really helpful for me, but I can sort of see some drawbacks as well.
Yeah, maybe it's like a little bit of a personality thing. I mean, I do think that, when players are taking it real easy and then they get put in like a really tough spot, just like kind of randomly, because like you don't get to pick when shit goes down. Sometimes shit goes down, you're right in the thick of it, and you have to make like a really tough decision. And one thing that I think, an issue players have is if you're playing quick, you're playing fast, you're kind of like, not really thinking about things, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're put in like a really tough spot. Well, now I think it takes you like a little bit longer to kind of get into like the mindset of like, what am I doing here, compared to like if you're thinking about it every hand. But I also think that it comes down to like, I'm not someone that likes to use the word experience too much. I think that in general, that term gets thrown around in ways that often mean just to kind of cover things up. Like, oh, I've been playing for 30 years. So like this was clearly good. It's like, oh, here I was trying to do math and stuff. Like, I didn't realize you played for 30 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to say experience is like extremely important, but I do think that as you play more of these things and as you get more and more used to, the players, the situations, like the higher stakes buy-ins, really all of that kind of thing, you become more accustomed to like, okay, well, when these spots come, when these spots come up, I have my system of thinking. I know that it's good. I believe in it. And so you can still arrive at like decisions that, you can at least get behind, not that they're always right. When you have a tough spot, it's never easy to figure out what you should be doing. But I
Yeah.
do think that as you have more experience playing some of these things, it's easier for you to, kind of get in the zone pretty quick.
For sure. And like I think there's, sometimes I wonder if I maybe slack off in the 1500s or something if I'm, not doing that, because I'm definitely, on my phone and chatting it up sometimes during the smaller blind tournaments. And but I think that in general, you can experience it's really only adding like a little bit. So sometimes if it takes too much energy, I think you might be wasting your time. I just think that if it's the highest blind tournament of the year, I'm definitely, just taking it to the extra level. Just even if it only adds a little bit, it's still worth a lot.
I know I tried to text you during the 300K and it was just showers.
Yeah, no, I mean, literally, like, I literally talked to no one all day.
It's all right. You don't have to justify it, Prop, but you hurt my feelings. Anyway, let's talk about the final table. So I actually didn't really get a chance to watch it because I was doing some filming with Poker Night in America. I'm going to be on one of their episodes coming up on CBS Sports. And so I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I will tell you on breaks, I was mashing F5 to see how you were doing. And it seemed like there were some swings there. Can you walk us through kind of like a little bit about the final table, how it went for you? And then there's at least one hand I know we're going to talk about.
Honestly, the final table basically went amazing until it went horrible. So it just like blew up in one hand, basically. Like if you had scripted the first 6 hours, like I don't think I could have written them. Like it basically was perfect. Like because I was coming to the final table, I was 5 of 8, but basically everyone from second through 7 all had the same stack basically, and Jacune was a little bit shorter. So coming in, I mean, if I lose 2 pots right away, I could be the next guy who's like the short stack, and everyone was still pretty deep, so it could have easily gone where I had a really bad start to the day and I was suddenly in risk of bubbling. But the first few hours went amazing. Like basically everything was perfect. I got up to chip lead within a few hours, like maybe 3 hours in or so. But it was a lot of just small pots and small to medium sized pots. It wasn't any big pots or big all in or something that got me to the chip lead. So it was basically like the dream day until it wasn't.
Yeah, and it's honestly tough when you're in that spot before the bubble bursts. It's kind of tough as like a middling to middling short stack to really build because and it depends on the table. Sometimes you get tables where the bigger stacks are just ruthless on, if the smaller stacks are going to try and win any pots, I'm going to make them like put everything in, because it's such a bad spot for them ICM wise. But not all tournaments are like that. I think from what I saw in the one drop, I think most people played pretty standard around the bubble. Even the bigger stacks didn't seem to go too crazy. It was on the feature table, so we kind of got to see what people had, and like no one was going that nuts, right? So, but then some high rollers, there can be total shenanigans. So, what was the bubble like? Because it went on for quite a few hours, right?
Yeah, I think it was definitely similar to the one drop, and there wasn't that much ICM pressure being applied by basically anyone. Like I don't think anyone was going too crazy. Everyone was playing. I think everyone kind of just played the way they normally play, but just a little bit tighter almost. So it would have been interesting because I think after, especially during Scoop, when I was like playing online and stuff, and watching some of the final table replays, like people there would be just going crazy to punish ICM, and really like big stacks were just opening whatever from whatever, like from early position, they just open any ace, open super wide. And I think it's like sort of a combo of, in high rollers and super high rollers, there's kind of a respect level towards your opponents where people don't like to play super out of line. They feel like it's almost disrespectful to be opening certain hands into other people. And I think that the bubble ended up being really slow. And, a part of that was also because it was deep stacked, it was 75-minute levels. And, the shortest stack, Jacune, had 35 blinds when we started. So like, it was way different of a dynamic than some final tables where there's, a 10 blind stack that everyone's kind of waiting to bust or whatever. But I think it was definitely a pretty slow final table in general.
Yeah, I mean, the shit, I'm like echoing now. The big blind difference, I mean, that's like the most notable event, most notable difference between the 300K and the one drop, other than about $190K. The biggest difference really is the structure, because the 300K structure is just amazing. It is a beautiful thing. There is a blind level increase on day one where it goes from $1,500 big blind, $500 small blind to a $1,500 big blind with $1,000 small
Yeah.
blind.
Yeah.
That's an actual thing in that tournament. You
The
know?
tournament was great, and then how the big blind was the only one who paid the ante or whatever was like it sped up the game so much, and obviously it could get some weird situations when you're short-handed or short-stacked at final tables and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed it. It just sped up the game a lot, you know, especially when you're playing nine-handed or whatever. Just one person has to throw out the big the big blind and the antes. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah. Well, what are your general thoughts on the big blind anteing? Because I don't think I've ever seen a tournament do that before, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's definitely pretty cool. It just like it really speeds up the game. I think short-handed it can lead for weird situations. And if you're short stacked, you're kind of under a lot of pressure under the gun to like avoid the big blind. Because you're not just playing the big blind, you're playing the big blind and the whole round of antes or whatever. But it also gives you like you can chill a little bit more in other positions. I think it was kind of interesting because I think it probably changed shoving ranges a little bit. That I'm not sure anyone actually changed their shoving ranges, but because I think it was kind of only sprung upon the tournament, within the last week. So I don't know if anyone really planned super far ahead for how they were going to change their shoving ranges. But it was definitely an interesting concept, and I kind of like it. I think that a lot more tournaments should just do it. It just, especially in these these World Series and all these things, like anteing alone just takes forever because like no one's anteing. Everyone's on their phones. They're not locked in like me. Ready to go, ready to play. So it's like anteing just always takes forever. So I think that I really like to see it. Just kind of proliferate out there.
So for everyone out there, Pratouche is telling you, get off your phones and put your ante in because Pratouche is trying to steal your blinds. But anyway,
Exactly.
let's get back to the final table here for a moment. So you built up a big stack with around, I believe, six left.
Seven.
Seven left.
I got short and then got one pay jump and then busted six. But
okay, so with seven left, I believe you actually had the chip lead.
Mm-hmm.
At least briefly, because I saw that update. I was like, wow, he's got a shot here. And then I guess we could say probably the worst hand of your life happened. I mean, I don't think probably not too much of a stretch. Do you want to walk us through the hand?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, super big hand, obviously. So Christoph opens onto the gun to 90K at I think 2040, and I think he had about 1.7 million, maybe 1.8 million. And then Jake flatted the button, and Jake was the only other stack who was really close to me. I think I had almost 5 million, and Jake had just like 500K less than me. And the other stacks were much shorter. I think Christoph might have been third in chips at this point with his like 2 million or so. So Jake flats the button. I looked down at aces, which I thought it was a good thing at the time, but it can also obviously be a very bad thing. So I squeezed to 400. I think maybe I could have gotten a little bigger. I think that I was just kind of didn't want to make it so big because like Christoph, only had like 1.8 or something. But I think I should have made it a little bigger because Jake being the button and being deep stacked, that maybe I could have gone a little bigger. But Christoph folds, Jake calls. And I have aces with no heart, which matters. I've given the flop. So the flop is queen 8-7 with 2 hearts. And kind of an interesting board. It kind of depends what his flatting range is here. So I kind of expect him to have, he's definitely going to have, sevens through maybe jacks. I think he would have 3-bet queens to get in versus Christoph pre-flop. And then he probably has some suited connectors and maybe some like suited aces. And the thing that I don't have the ace of hearts. And I think I could have bet the flop, but I decided to check and just go into check call mode, trying to like, I guess maybe just play a little more pot control. I didn't want him to raise with like a flush draw or something. And I mean, sorry, I'm just kind of rambling here a little bit. I guess because this hand is kind of just an interesting hand. I think I could have bet the flop, but I decided to check and just sort of play it as a check call. I think that's reasonable. But
so yeah, just a couple questions here. So are you planning on having flop bets here? By the way, I think pre-flop size is fine. Because you can't go like that much bigger really, because you have to make it a size where you still raise some weak hands against Christoph as a bluff. But What's your game plan kind of on the flop if you're going to check aces? I mean, don't get me wrong, aces are always like a pretty strong check. Generally prefer checking with the heart over, the not heart. But in general, I can get behind aces trap. But are you planning on betting very many hands here? Do you interpret this board as being very good for the range he's flatting?
I think
Can
it's
you give
pretty
me kind
good
of an
for him.
idea of what's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's actually it's like a pretty good board for his range in general because I think basically all of his hands either have a pair or a gut shot, or there's gonna be some hands like Ace Jack of Spades specifically that I guess I had based it, but like there are a couple combos of suited hands that don't hit something. But Jack 10, 10 9 are all gonna have something. King Jack, one of the combos will have a flush draw. Others will have a backdoor flush draw. So his board in general hits this board. His range in general hits this board pretty hard. Like I think there's very few hands that fold a flop bet here. I think that's definitely an argument for maybe going ahead and betting. I think I definitely bet aces some percentage of the time here. I think I just mix it a little bit here. One thing that's interesting is, having the ace of hearts, you're a little more protected on a heart turn, but you also block him from having one of his most likely like hands that could start bluffing, So like if I have aces without a heart, like it's way more likely he has like ace jack of hearts or ace 10 of hearts that starts betting and I can like just call down versus. So that was basically part of my thinking as well.
All right, so you check and then what goes down?
He bets 400, I call. And, at this point, I don't expect him to ever bet, obviously, like Jack 10 9s. I think he will bet his 10-9 suited, his Jack 10 suited. I could see him. I'm not sure what he would do with ace queen. I think he probably just bets it. And then obviously he bets his 7s and 8s. And then I think he bets some of his flush draws, if not all of them. But
seems fair. I actually think one of the best things about this board checking good hands, I think you get a lot of bets because I don't know if like the lowest pairs are really going to want to flat. I mean, maybe even if Kristoff's open, or really to the 3-bet. I mean, you're deep, so maybe. I mean, if I saw threes here, I wouldn't be like it would be like marginal, but certainly possible. But outside of that, like if you think about the kinds of hands they're going to call open, call 3-bet on the button. A lot of those hands are tempted to bet flop either for value or some kind of semi bluff. So. I can get behind with checking a few additional hands.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely like a lot of bluffs here. I think obviously once we check, this is just pretty standard check call. Turns a 3. So about as blank as you can get. I check.
Unless he has the 3s.
Yeah. It's definitely funny because in some spots, like I think you could bluffing some pairs just because you just turn the nuts on 2 cards sometimes is like can be a reasonable bluff. Like if it's like one of your worst hands. I mean, I don't think this would have been one of the spots, but just sometimes. Anyway, I check all 725, and at this point, I'm just like I'm not feeling great about my hand. I'm feeling fine-ish. I don't want to play a big pot here. Like we're both of us at the big stacks. And tangling with each other is really not good for either of us. And I think that's kind of what makes this hand kind of tricky. Because I think if you just look at it from a pure chip EV, perspective, like this is just like the easiest call down ever. Yeah, and you're like fine with however you play the hand, whether you like bet the flop or you decide to check call or whatever. But the thing is, with ICM, it's really bad for both of us to be playing a big pot versus each other, which means that Jake is definitely less incentivized to just like barrel it off here and stuff like that. So like on the turn already, I was kind of like not super happy because Jake is definitely not incentivized to try to bluff it off here. Like he kind of like has a good stack and a good position. So it's not. I'm not feeling great, but I still have the aces. It's Queen 8 7 3. Like what am I gonna do? And then I'm definitely planning on folding some rivers. Like I think a heart river I would definitely fold. Like a 9 or a 10 is definitely a pretty awkward river. But then basically the blankest river card ever comes out is another 3. So it's Queen 8 7 3 3. The flush draw misses. I check, and he shoves for 2.5 million, and I have about 3 million back. And I mean, I think this spot is just one of those where it's very simple from a chippy perspective. Like he definitely has enough bluffs here. Like this is an easy call. His like value range is he has eights and sevens, and then he could have. I don't think he has pocket queens because I think he would have 3-bet pre-flop versus Kristoff. So I think it's basically his value range is eights and sevens, and then as long as he's bluffing with 10-9 suited, Jack-10 suited, there's like plenty of hands. Jack-10 suited. There's the flush draw misses. I don't have the ace of hearts, so from a pure chippy perspective, it's just like a snap call. But it's definitely kind of just a tricky spot where with ICM and stuff, you don't know how often he's gonna like wanting to just put in this last 2.5 million. Because even if he checks back and shows down just a missed bluff, he's still second in chips and has 65, 70 blinds, and it's not a big deal for him really. So from that perspective, if like my gut said fold, but I ended up calling because I was just like, you know what, I have to call aces. But yeah, that's basically how it went.
And he did have the pocket eights, so he got value. But I want to address like a couple lines of thinking here, because it starts to seem like it goes dangerously into circular thinking, where it's like, well, if he knows that bluffing it, like you don't play big pot here, right? So he shouldn't bluff. So if he's not bluffing, you should just always fold, right?
Yeah. No,
so if you just always fold, bluffing becomes like absurdly good.
Yeah, no, it's just like there's definitely some sort of like ICM tax that's like hard to price, where both of us are sort of like disincentivized to be doing stuff, but then like you can't overdo it, but you also kind of have to respect it as well, So it's not that I'm saying that Jake should never bluff here. I'm just saying that he's less incentivized to just run it with 10-9 here than like in a normal situation. If this was the fifth hand of the tournament or something, and he's just like 10-9 series, just like fuck it, like I'm just gonna run it, But I think with ICM, there's always that extra tax you're kind of paying to
For sure. And I think okay, so I would actually argue a couple things here. So for starters, absolutely the ICM thing is in play, but even though he's not putting you, he's not putting you in for your tournament life, you're still going to be the shortest here, like by a bunch if you call and lose.
Yeah.
So I actually view that ICM pressure as like a reason to bluff.
Mm-hmm.
Because in your shoes, like you go from being like chip lead to being like just on the ropes, like was it after the bubble?
Yeah, it was after the bubble. Like
okay, so you go from being like chip lead to being like last chip, very likely to get seventh place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I'm not saying that I think bluffing here is an amazing spot, but if we look at it like this, think about the other kinds of hands that we're going to check call here. You're absolutely going to have some occasional like queen jack suited, queen 10 suited hands. You're going to have hands like, if you decide to go check call with the ace king of hearts or ace jack of hearts, which you definitely would mix into your strategy too. You could have like, I don't know like which cards were the suit or not, so it's like hard for me to say exactly.
But yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
I guess my main point is with the exception of having queen, which I believe you would play like this sometimes, because I know how you play, and I know you would play queen like this sometimes. With the exception of top set, this is like kind of as good as it gets. I mean, maybe you could make an argument. Were the 8 and the 7 a heart? I know it's like not like that huge of a deal, but
yeah,
I think the texture.
Yeah, I remember it at the time, but like I don't remember it now, honestly.
Okay, so I mean, maybe it's actually better to have like 9-8 of hearts.
Yeah.
Because like if you think he only has 8-8 and 7-7, then maybe hands like that are better. But I mean the point remains, like you have like an upper echelon call here, and the turn bet, by the way, is definitely on the smaller side.
Mm-hmm.
It's like not like a huge size turn bet, so I do think you have some extra hands that are going to check call the turn.
For sure. One thing that's nice, if he has 8-7 suited here, I think he definitely like turns it into a bluff, which is nice for me. But because that's more. I mean, that's a couple like a hand I was beating on the. I was beating on the, or I was losing to on the turn that I'm now winning against on the river.
Yeah, I think if he has 8-7, he takes his showdown because he has some showdown. Like you could have like the nut flush draw and like check call.
Yeah, I think he has some showdown, but he also has like the greatest, like it's like it's like a nice hand to bluff there too. I mean, it just depends on how you think about it. I feel like. I wouldn't be surprised if someone turned 8-7 in a bluff.
So I guess the way that I would look at it is like this. In spots where calling really like hurts you a lot relative to what you gain. By the way, if you called and we're right, like you would have been in the best spot.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if I was called and I like win a lot there from there, basically.
Clearly win a lot. So here's the thing. I think in tough ICM spots, I think like calibrating a little bit to be a little bit tighter than what just like a chip EV strategy would be is good. Yeah. Because it is worse for you to lose here than it's not equal. Like the gain isn't equal to the loss. So I'm with you on that. But the thing is, if you take that to an extreme where it's like, I'm going to fold no matter what because he has it and like no one's going to bluff here and it's a bad ICM spot. Well, then you put like, look, honestly, man, like the high roller scene is not huge. There's not a ton of us. There's like, I don't know, 50, 30, 60. I don't know. It's not 100. There's not 100 high roller regs. And if you're like, hey guys, I'm willing to fold aces if you barrel me at 3-bet pots.
Yeah. No, I know.
I mean,
no, I agree, and it was one of those where my head was like, okay, this is like a snap call. Like, I mean, that's what I only use one time extension bank, and honestly, there was no point in even using it because like I feel like I was never gonna fold in this spot, but I was just like, whatever, I'm gonna think about it. But it was definitely one of those where the gut felt like it was a fold, but my head said all the same things you're saying. Like I can't just only have queens as my check call here, and this is a nice hand to do it. I don't even just like having not having the ace of hearts gives him some few more potential bluff combos he might go with. There's plenty of hands that missed. Like I said, if the 9 of hearts comes on the river or something, I'm like, okay, a lot of stuff got there. Like I could maybe fold, especially given the extra price I need to be right on this call down. But when it runs out like that, it's just like a clear call. But yeah, I think it's just an easy one to like sort of second guess when you're wrong.
For sure. And one last note about this hand, it is against Jake Schindler. And I know Jake Schindler, not like a super well-known player in like the world of poker. He's known in the high roller circuit, obviously has good results. Went to the same high school as Ryan Fee. That's pretty insane to me. In fact, I was playing with him like 3 or 4 handed in a 100K a couple of years ago. And he said to me, he's like, yeah, so like it's crazy you went to high school with Fees, right? And I was like, what? He like never told me. And I asked Fees, and he's like, oh yeah, we went to high school together. I'm like, you didn't? There's like a random other guy playing 100Ks, and like you didn't tell me the story about like you guys went to high school together, dude. If there was some random guy from my high school playing 100Ks, I would tell everyone that story. That's a great story.
Obviously, like that would be amazing. But yeah.
But anyway, about Jake, like, like I'll say this about Jake. Jake lives in the woods. And he's not afraid to chop down some trees. You never know what the guy's a little bit crazy sometimes, a lot crazy sometimes. You never exactly know what he's doing. He never exactly knows what he's doing, and he gets in your head. I remember one hand, I can't remember the exact action, but it was basically like I called a flop bet, turn one check over, he bet. I thought about it and I laid it down. He's like, you definitely had Jack 7 there. And it was just like a simple single raise pot spot, and I had Jack 7. Okay. I had Jack 7. I looked at him and he looked at me, and like he doesn't guess my hand all the time. Like he does it every now and then. And I'm like, okay, all right, what's going on here? What's so I mean, he's good at reading people. He will go for it. He's an aggressive player. I mean, he's a good player. He's honestly like I think Jake is like one of the better players in the high rollers. Like
I definitely agree. That was another thing that definitely made it like so there was no like I don't think there was at any point during that time I was tanking where I was actually considering fold. It was just like this is a huge spot and I have to like I should just think about it, go through combos and stuff like that, obviously think about my range. But yeah, I think Jake is extremely good. I think he really hand reads well, and I think he reads people's like vibes like really well as well. It's like just how they sort of the vibe people are giving off during the hand, and I think he's really good at getting into psychology and things like that. So I think that I think I was feeling a little bit uncertain on the turn, flop and turn, and if I was giving that vibe off, anyway, I think that, you know, if he had a bluff, like, I think he definitely would have gone for it, to be honest. Like, I think I'm just more second guessing just because it was just like he turned out to have with eights. But I think versus someone like Jake, I mean, I agree with you. He's an extremely good player. He's very good at hand reading and very good at, you know, reading people's psychology. And I think he would, like what you just said was probably a really good point as well, where I had a really good situation. So he's going to know that I'm not going to want to give that up. And so that's another reason to, you know, sort of turn the pressure on when you have a hand like 10-9 suited or something.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I'm not saying it's a fun spot. I'm not saying I'm like walking away happy about it. But like, you know, at the end of the day, like sometimes you just gotta like you gotta make them show the goods, and if they got it, like, I mean, you just can't play aces like 3-bet and then like stuff bricks and I'm giving it up to like some guy that like definitely is capable, you know. And I hate the word capable. Like people throw that word around so much, but like, you know, in the high rollers, it's kind of like this. In the high roller scene, pretty much everyone can bluff. Like there's not like that's actually one thing that I learned when I started playing high rollers. You play against some of the older guys, and you're like, oh man, like I'm just gonna run these nits down, and then they just like they just don't do that. Like they just go crazy. Like
no one's afraid. Yeah,
I remember Roger Sipple.
He was the greatest. Yeah,
I remember a hand where I was on 100K. I raised, he called the big blind. I checked back at a weak ace on ace jack. Turn was a king. He checked. We're like deepish in 100K, near the bubble, or just I think maybe near the bubble, but not quite there yet. Yeah, we're like a table away from the bubble. And he checks. I delay c-bet, and he just check bombs it. Ace jack king. And I'm like, all right, call. And then the river is a brick. It's like a deuce or whatever. I don't vote. And he just rips it. And we're like, you know, relatively deep. And I'm like, okay, I guess like, I mean, I would never do this against anyone that I thought was like doing, like, you know, capable of making some moves and stuff. But, you know, you give the older gentleman a little bit of credit that he's got the goods and you lay it down.
Yeah.
And I laid it down and he showed me the king 10. Or just the second pair, check bomb, let him rip. And then, I mean, that's not the only time. James Woods has made some moves on me. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I just bring out the craziness in some people. But the thing is, in the high roller scene, you can't just be like, oh, they're not going to bluff, right? Even some of the tighter guys, like, and we know who they are. I don't want to like just like blast people, but even like the tighter guys, they can make some moves. This spot, I will admit, is a little bit different. I think that there are a bunch of players that would just not run it. It's just too devastating if they lose. Thank you. It's just too devastating if they lose. But I would not put Jake in that list.
Jake and then you've got to call it down. I mean, you never, like, I just talking about the situation. Like, you never heard me in that analysis say, and you know, Jake underbluffs, so yeah, whatever. But like, because I don't think that's the case at all. Like, there are the people who could run it in that spot in a 300K. I think he's one of the few guys I would actually, like, you know, I mean, a lot of them, the guys who I would give credit to are the ones who play the high rollers, obviously, you know, like all the German guys, you know, Jake, like all those guys, I give them credit for that. And, you know, there's plenty of guys who play the high rollers that I would, but if there's just like some random person from a World Series 1500, then, you know, I would not necessarily feel like that was, you know, the case.
All right. So you end up losing the pot to a set. You managed to get, you know, one page up and you bust. And I want to read the tweet because the tweet was quite emo, Pratt. It was a very emo Pratt moment.
Yeah, I think it's the emoest thing I've ever written.
You tweeted this: "Screwed up the biggest moment of my life. Not sure I'm ever going to be able to forgive myself, but appreciate all the well wishes and support." All right, so do you feel like maybe this was a little too harsh? I mean,
yeah, it definitely was a little bit harsh. I think that, you know, if you know any of my background at all, like I've always been an extremely competitive person. You know, I think that's why I even, you know, it's kind of weird. I think that's kind of what drives me into tournaments, because I like the idea of finishing in first place and winning. And, you know, I have like no degen in me. You know, I don't like blackjack. I don't like, you know, just random, just gambling. I
like that example. I'm not degen. I don't like blackjack.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't sports bet. I don't do anything like that. I like poker because it's a competition and it's a mental competition. And I really like the strategy side of that. And, you know, so being a very competitive person, like I've always cared a lot about winning. And you know, when I lost the tournament, I think a lot of people kind of thought like it was about, you know, not winning first place money, or like, you know, they're like, oh, I had the chip lead, so like if I had just hung on for a couple more pay jumps, I would have made X amount of money more. And you know, the money didn't run in through my mind at all, because like that wasn't what bothered me. It was just the competitive nature of like losing and not you know, when I was in such, I felt like I was in such a good position and had been playing really well. Like, I think it was one of those things, if I had just been 7 of 7, like in 10 minutes or something, I would have just been happy with whatever. But it just coming up to the point where I felt like the day had gone about as perfect as it could go. And then it just blows up in one hand. I think that was a little bit devastating.
Yeah, I think, I mean, don't get me wrong, like that's crippling. I mean, like, I'm taking a lap after that one for sure. That's just brutal. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to really, like, you know, you don't get that many opportunities every year to play at stakes this high, and then you don't make very many final tables. So like, I get feeling like, you know, this is one of the best opportunities you're going to get to win a high roller. But dude, there are high rollers every year. I mean, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be here to stay.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And I think, you know, it's just more just in the moment, because I feel like I've definitely had a few other runs like this. I've gotten 8th and 7th in 2 different EPTs or whatever. So it's, you know, similarly very frustrating deep runs in big, you know, big spots, that I think it just the combined memory of having those previous results and this kind of just like felt like I was like, oh, well, I'm never going to win in these spots, because you know, I felt about as prepared I ever had. You know, was constantly felt like I was, you know, I felt really good the whole final table and the whole tournament. And I think it just sort of like crashed down, because I felt I'd built myself up so much mentally and was so ready. You know, I was just felt like I was playing the best I'd ever played. So yeah.
You know, when I first met you a few years ago, I've been very careful in my life with like who I've chosen to work with in poker. I've been very selective. You know, it's not too many people that, you know, and I guess I mean more towards the higher stake stuff that I've done. I've worked with, you know, a decent amount of people at the lower stakes, but in general, the main thing that I looked for when I just hardworking, good people that really wanted to be something, you know, like guys like Dong, guys like, you know, Jimmy Chow or Chow Chow, or Jason Les, or, you know, all those people that like were good people and hard workers and wanted to achieve something. One thing that I've always seen from you, like, you are extremely competitive. Like, it's in your blood, dude. You won the spelling bee when you were
Yeah.
How old were you when it was?
Just turned 13. Yeah.
Okay, so 13. So you won the Scripps National Spelling Bee, right?
Yeah.
Like, you were like, that's, by the way, congratulations. That's a sick win. It's a sick win for a 13-year-old. But
Yeah.
the thing is, like, you know, poker's not gonna be like that. You can't spend every night with, like, instead of a dictionary, you just spend it with, like, you know, applications of No Limit Hold'em, and then, like, you know, now, oh, good to go. I can just win every tournament. Like, poker's not fair. There's no justice. I always try and like say this to you every time. Like, remember, there's no justice in tournaments. There's
Yeah.
no justice in tournaments. And then you're like, yeah, I'm gonna play tournaments. I'll make sure to remember that. And then and then this stuff happens. But the thing is, like, the way tournaments work, it's gonna do that to you. And I'm a competitive person too, man. Like, I really like to try and be good at what I do. Obviously, I want to be successful with what I do, but you have to be prepared for failure, because it's mainly going to happen. You know, that Super High Roller Bowl, obviously a small field, but still 56 people, like, your chance of winning that tournament, you know, and then people are always going to, oh, but my edge, but, you know, like 2%-ish, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you just can't set the bar so high, or you're going to constantly let yourself down.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I'm trying to work on more. I think mindset has always been a little bit difficult because of that competitive nature, where, you know, I take losing a little harsher than I think some people do. And I think that, you know, yeah, like you said, it's not like the spelling bee where it's just like, okay, well, I'm the best, and so I'm gonna win. You know, like, that's just not how it works it's in tournaments anyway. So I think it's just, you know, channeling the competitiveness in a healthy way is something that I definitely have to work on. And I think that, you know, this was definitely a tough experience at the time, but I think it's been a pretty good learning experience. Like, I've definitely thought about a lot of different stuff, and, you know, kind of examined, you know, what I want to get out of poker. So I think that was helpful.
Awesome. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about some new stuff, some exciting stuff here. For those of you that don't know, Pratyush joined Upswing Poker. We don't have a lot of coaches. We have 4 coaches at the moment. Pratyush joined us last month and created the Tournament Masterclass, which is our tournament course on Upswing Poker. Do you want to talk a little bit about the creation of that, a little bit about your thoughts on it, kind of like who it's geared for, just a little bit about the course?
Yeah, for sure. I think the cool thing about the Tournament Masterclass is it's really a comprehensive guide to tournaments. So I think basically all you see right now for tournament videos is just people just going through a hand history they played. And, it's like, hey, I was in this spot and this is how the tournament went. And let me talk about the hands I played, and that's it. And so you just get some, these few like one-off situations that they explain their reasoning. And you can definitely learn a little bit from that. Like we definitely have that in the course as well, where we go through a bunch of hand histories. But I think the whole thing about the course was think about everything starting with pre-flop and going all the way through the river. So how should we think about our pre-flop ranges? How do we want to make adjustments? And just basically every situation from pre-flop. And I think that's like a really good way to start off the course. And then we do the same thing for post-flop, starting with the flop and going through the turn and river. Just how we want to sort of apply, I think, the way you think about poker into tournaments. So there's obviously some differences where, ranges are quite different than they are in heads up, but you can apply the same sort of thinking to, tournaments. And the idea is just to take, I always call it the quote unquote Doug strategy, and learning how to apply it in tournaments. And that's what these videos are doing. So we, how do we play loose? How do we, bluff everywhere in different ranges? And how do we, really think in a logical, structured way about the flop, turn, and the river? So like in the river on the aces hand, I wasn't just thinking, this guy never bluffs here. I mean, you kind of think, okay, what are the combos? Like what are my check calls? And there's definitely sometimes tournament thinking will always invade your mind, and you got to avoid that. But I think the course is really about learning how to think in that sort of structured way.
I think that's really the best way to approach poker, because there are just so many players in general that like to say sweeping statements and be like, oh, he always has it, or he never has it, or like if they're not bluffing, just fold, or like all of this kind of stuff. Yeah. And the problem with that like type of thinking is it's great until they bluff, know. It's great until they don't do what you think they're gonna do. So like I always prefer to like take like a very a very like consistent approach. Start with the same factors and then go down a checklist and then arrive at kind of where you want to be. And then think about maybe some small things that are important to kind of make decisions around those edge hands. That's, yeah, if I had to like define the Doug strategy in like one thing, that would be it, If you know someone is more aggressive, don't be like, oh, I'm never going to fold the river because this guy just bluffs too much. Yeah, that's great until he's like, oh, this guy never folds. In fact, he's thinking the same thing. This guy never folds the river. And then you're thinking like, this guy always bluffs the river. And then next time it gets there, you can get owned. So rather than making big sweeping adjustments like that, I think it's way better to be like, okay, I'm going to have like a solid strategy. And I'm just going to like tweak some things kind of around the edges based on who I'm playing.
Yeah, it's like not about swinging for the fences. I think a lot of people, when they get to the river and someone bets, they're thinking they're just going to call their entire range or fold their entire range. And that's not how you play, Like, I think people are just get to the river and they're like, is he bluffing? And it's like, okay, I think he's bluffing. I'm calling with queen high. And it's like, and they're like, oh, I don't think he's bluffing. They're like, okay, I'm folding like a set. It's just like, they're not thinking about, you need to call a certain percentage of your range when you get to the river. And I think the whole thing about the course was to really take that and apply that to tournaments, and then talk about, some of the adjustments you need to be making for tournaments, because, there's a lot of different tournament dynamics that go along, when you get near the bubble, how you want to think about the final two tables and final table. And, we'll go through all of that in the course as well. So it's not just, here's the pre-flop and post-flop guide. And I think it just goes through every aspect of the tournament. And then you also get a bunch of, full play and explains where we go through hand histories and then even just specific situations. So it's really a comprehensive guide to tournaments.
Yeah, and that's, I think, actually kind of the tough thing with tournaments compared to cash games. I like cash games it's you get the same situation so frequently. It's about like being a little bit better than people. It's about like being very accurate. It's about like very small, like micro, like level decisions. Whereas like I like to think of tournaments as you're painting a painting, and like there are colors everywhere and the canvas is blank because
Yeah.
there are so many unique spots. Like you can't be like, okay, guys, so 2 off the bubble, the 2.5x blind bubble. I'm on 17 blinds in the hijack. Button's got 26. Big blind covers. And I'm like, oh, I've done tons of work on this spot.
Yeah, exactly. I
I
think
always run my I always run my sims on this exact situation. I know exactly what the answer is.
yeah, it's really about getting to knowing, it's learning about what ideas you should be thinking about and what factors are in play. And so like definitely in some of the videos, I'll be like, okay, here are the general factors you should be thinking about, because I can't just give you like an auto like range or situation of how you want to play. It's like, you got to like, okay, here are the things you should be thinking about. Like, okay, what does the big blind, like, how wide does the big blind defend here? Or, things like that. It's like a factor, but I'm not gonna be like, okay, here, if he defends 33% of his hands and, 3-bets these specific cards, it's like, you can't really do that. It's just way too general.
Absolutely. And if you guys are interested in checking out more about the course, you can check it out on upswingpoker.com. But if you just want free information too, we got a lot of stuff. So feel free to stop on by. Let's move on. Let's talk about a new subject here.
Okay.
So Pratt, one thing I've noticed in the last year or so, I feel like we've been going opposite directions. I have been putting on the stream. They call it the freshman 15 here for streaming. So I think I'm only about 15 pounds. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, I've been putting on a few pounds. You have been looking good, man. Dropping some weight, looking good. What's the last year been like for you? You've been dieting a lot. You've been in the health game. Every now and then I see some tweeting, like some tweets where you very strongly feel about stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on health, like what you've been up to?
Yeah. So I think last year I peaked at somewhere, I think I was around 200 pounds at my heaviest, maybe in April or May. And then I think I finished the series and I was probably still like 195 or so. And, I'm 5'11", basically 6 feet. And I was definitely, fat, and I was still working out, but I think the biggest thing was my diet was really messed up. And so I kind of just wanted to do some more research and figuring out like how to fix my diet, because I could just tell that, what I was eating was not, I didn't feel great all the time. I was always tired. I had to drink like infinite coffee or Red Bull and just wasn't eating too well. And I'd experimented with the Tim Ferriss slow carb diet before, which is basically where you eat mostly proteins and fats and then some lentils, and then you have a once a week cheat day on Saturday. And I'd done that before and gotten decent results. So that's like kind of the intro I was going for. And then I found this guy who's called John Kiefer, who wrote the Carb Night Solution. And it's basically a more aggressive version of the Tim Ferriss diet, where you basically only eat proteins and fats for 6.5 days. And you have once a week carb night where you sort of eat some carbs and replenish your glycogen stores and things like that. So that's kind of basically the diet I've been following for the last year, where I stick with pretty fatty meats and proteins during the week, and then I'll have a carb night once a week where I just eat whatever I want.
Interesting. So fatty meats, because I feel like the one thing that I hate about like the health genre is there's just so much bullshit out there. And the way that search engines work, when people search for things, they're kind of looking for something, like if you search like eating meat bad, clearly you're kind of saying it is. So like, you're going to find some, I'm not saying that people are going to Google it. And actually, Doug, they're all good. No, but the point is like, whatever you're looking for, you can find it, right? Because you don't have to put the truth on the internet. This is a news flash to a lot of people. Guys, not everything you see on the internet is true, believe it or not. So, it's tough sometimes to get good information. And one thing that I found actually, because I've like swung around with my weight a decent amount, I'm still pretty overweight, but the last like few months I've actually dropped some weight. But one thing that I've always found is I have a hard time like with like I think portion size when I'm like eating out. Like it's hard to like go to a meal like dinner and then have like a little piece of chicken,
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what the fatty meats helps for. And also even just the cheat day or the cheat night or whatever helps as well. So you can sort of plan your once a week nice dinner around, a night you're going to eat carbs anyway. That's generally what I do. If I'm going to go somewhere nice, I'll I'll try to schedule my carb night for that night. But if I'm just eating out, if it's just, a regular protein fat day, I think the nice thing about eating, steak or burger with no bun, obviously, is it just keeps you full longer. Like I have no trouble, just because your insulin didn't spike. So I have no trouble going 16 hours in intermittent fasting when I'm eating fats and proteins. Whereas if, even just in a carb night, you can be hungry like 2 hours later just because the carbs spike your insulin and messes with your hunger so much that you can really, you're just hungry all the time. You the first taste of sugar, you're like, I want more sugar. I want more sugar. And it's like, I think carbs are basically like a drug that you can use for good, or you can use it for bad. And I try to just basically use it once a week to, keep me a little bit sane so I don't like get bored with my diet. And then it also, the first couple of days after a carb night are also the days I go heaviest in the gym with my lifting, just because my glycogen stores are full after the carb night. So I can really like, I try to go heavier in the week, and then I'm a little bit lighter going into the rest of the week, just because, I'm relying a little bit, I don't have as full of glycogen stores if they run out after the carbs have been sort of burned off.
Interesting. This sounds like, have you written up like your thoughts on it? I know sometimes every now and then you do like a blog post where you talk about things. Have you written anything about, your journey through this?
I haven't, but I definitely could, because it seems like that's probably the thing that most people have hit me up for over the last 6 months. Like Jesse Sylvia, I saw him at Bellagio in December, and he started messaging me about it. Now he's like fully on board, and a few other people I know have like really been asking me questions about it, because I think I've definitely made like a big change in diet, and the biggest thing is body composition as well. So I think it's I think you can lose weight pretty easily if you just restrict your calories and do a lot of cardio. But with the way I'm eating, it's really easy to still like keep muscle on, and I think my body composition has been really good, and I don't do that much cardio. Like I do sprints once or twice a week, and that's it. And I've still, I think I'm 157 pounds or so now, so like 40 pounds lighter than I was a year ago.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Congrats. That's sick.
But yeah, it's been awesome. And I think the body composition is the biggest thing. It's not just like I lost 40 pounds and I like look super skinny and, no muscular definition. I think the diet, I think, is really good. And just, I think if anyone really if they really want to get in the weeds on it, read the book, The Carb Night Solution by John Kiefer. Follow him on Twitter. I think he's really good. He's coming out with a new one, which should give you more details. But it's not just like it's like a fad diet or a cult diet, because it's basically a modified version of the Tim Ferriss diet and the cyclical keto diet. So there's a lot of versions of this out there. I just like the version that he does because it's very, it's easy to follow. Like if it's a Wednesday and you're like, fuck, I really want some pasta, it's like, okay, well, my carb night's in 2 days, not a big deal. It's easier to sort of take, not eat that plate of pasta that night. Whereas if you feel like I have to eat perfect all the time, you're going to just like give in and cave. And then you're just going to go on like, a 2-month binge of just eating whatever.
Yes, I've been there.
I think everyone has. I've been there too. In Australia a year and a half ago, I was just eating zingers from KFC and busting tournaments. So it was like a great point in my life.
Honestly, the toughest thing for me is like, I'm a hard worker. I like to spend my day doing stuff. I like to be active. I like to, try and get a workout in, and then try and make a video for YouTube, and like maybe go play some poker and like do this and do that. And like, I like try and do stuff all day. And then like when I get to the end of the day, I'm like, all right, time for like a nice meal, like, a drink, like time to like kind of unwind a little bit. But that kind of brings me to my next question. So do you drink alcohol at all on this?
I have been trying to cut back. I sometimes have it on my carb night, but if it's a regular protein fats night, I generally don't. And it's like hard to have a social life if you don't drink. So that's the biggest problem. Like I basically cut out casual drinking in the sense, like I don't just, have a beer at the end of the night or, in that sort of sense. But, if I'm back home in Colorado and I'm like meeting up with my friends, like, and they want to go out drinking, I'll make sure the carb night is scheduled for that day. And generally probably like, not eat too much before the night. And then, just try to keep it on the cleaner alcohol, either a vodka soda, maybe just whiskey straight or red wine. But it's definitely, I think if you're trying to be the optimal perfect person, you wouldn't be drinking. But, you still got to have a bit of a social life and stuff like that. So I try to keep it, as balanced as I can.
Right. We are alive and enjoy things. That's probably still part of life.
Yeah.
So let's move on here. Let's take a look at some of the questions. I posted it on a few different places. If people had any questions for you, we already talked about diet as well as a few other things. But there is one other hand that I think a few people have asked me about. So I did not really see the hand, but it's been a popular point of contention. There was apparently a river where you called a bet with top boat on a double paired board. Can you go into that?
So this hand is pretty interesting. It's funny because some people like get what my thinking was, and then other people don't get it at all. But anyway, I opened queen nine suited on the gun, and this is when I still had a lot of chips, and Jake had a lot of chips. I think Jake actually covered me at this point. But we both had about 4 million, and I think he had like 4.5 million, and everyone else was much shorter. And I don't remember if the bubble had burst at this point or not. I probably should remember that, but anyway, I opened with queen nine suited. Jake flats the small blind, and I think like right away when it's two relatively tight ranges, like under the gun versus small blind, we're both big stacks. I think he's probably flatting, something like fives, and then some like maybe ace 10 suited plus, some other suited broadways, some suited connectors. So anyway, the flop comes queen 6-6, and he checks. I check with queen 9, which I think is pretty standard, at least for the way we think. I don't know if it's standard for everyone, but I don't want to get on the flop too much. And the turn's a queen, so it's queen 6-6 queen, and Jake checks again. And so my thinking at this point is his range is kind of bifurcated or trifurcated, I guess, into 3 parts. It's junk hands that are always folding versus a bet, and maybe off the river if I check back. Then there's like some pairs and stuff in the middle. And maybe ace highs that call 1 bet, and I think pairs generally are going to fall in that category as well. Like he's probably only going to call 1 big bet. And then he obviously has a queen, or he has pocket sixes, which are the other 2 parts of the range. And I kind of just felt that pairs are like not going to call 2 bets that often, and maybe I can get a big bluff from the other hands on the river. If if I check back twice, I think most people wouldn't put me on many boats, and I might get like a 1.5x pot bet or something that I just get a bunch of money from 10-9 suited or something that I wouldn't have gotten before. And I thought his pairs, when it checks the river, are either going to check again or kind of bet on the smaller side. Like I've definitely seen Jake and other players make sort of block bets in these situations where they bet very, very small. And I was like, okay, well I'm just going to raise versus that anyway. I didn't expect to. I kind of thought he would bet super big, like he would bet huge on the river or bet really small. And the river was a 4, and he bet kind of an in-between size. He bet, I think, 2/3 pot. And so at this point, obviously, I'm not afraid of being beat or anything like that. But the point, I kind of thought that he's never calling a pair to a raise. And when I raise, he can just shove every queen. And I basically have to call off what we either 7 or 8. And we were first 2 in chips. And if I just call off and lose to quads, I'm calling for a chop pot, obviously, because it's either a queen or he has quads. And I thought he would never, ever call with a pair versus this line. And so I'm basically just opening up the betting to get jammed on and have to call off with my queen for a chop pot. And then obviously every once in a blue moon, I just bust because he has quads. And I think basically when you think about the river here, it's just, if you have to try to figure out how much he's going to call with a pair, and I just thought he would just basically never call. So I didn't think there was too much value in raising.
Well, the only thing I would say is your hand is so underrepped here. Like, if it goes check,
you also have to think about the line. Like, if you're in Jake's shoes and I check back the flop, check back the turn, and he bets the sizing with 9s, like, it's just like, it's one of those like spots where you have to get very creative to bluff here, and it's going to be a spot that everyone's going to overfold a lot, which means it's probably a decent spot to bluff. But that doesn't mean that in this situation that he's going to expect me to bluff here.
Well, I think you should raise here. I mean, yes, I understand that if he has 6s, excuse me, I understand if he has 6s, you're out of the tournament, which does suck. But that's obviously extremely rare. And there's some chance that we would see sixes bet on the turn or bet a different size on the river. I'm not saying it's exactly how I know how he plays sixes,
Yeah.
but they're not always in there either. And so, you know, when I think about all of the hands that he can have in this situation, I really feel like just min raising the river is like a reasonable play.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really see a reason to go bigger than that.
Yeah,
don't really
I think that's the problem. I think I didn't think about sizing smaller. Like I was just kind of like, okay, you bet 140, so I have to make it like 400 or something, and then he can just like, I'm never getting called by a pair. And but maybe like I think if I min raise, then I definitely, you know, it's way more of a tough, like a spot where, you know, hand like tens or something is like feels like almost priced in or whatever. So.
Yeah, well, if you start raising very big, then raising doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the mistake there. I didn't really think about a smaller sizing there, but I do think that's a spot where, especially someone who's like, you know, very capable, you know, someone like Jake, I think he's gonna be more inclined to, and he's definitely gonna put me in a tough spot with by just jamming there a lot when he has a queen or sixes. And then I just don't know if he's ever calling a pair there, which I hate making like those kinds of statements, obviously. And if it was earlier in the tournament, or, you know, there was no ICM pressure, if I was even just, you know, 5 of 7 and had, you know, a million or something, I would not be worried about reopening the betting or anything. But it's when we're so far ahead of everyone else. Like the goal is, again, I was like, you know, the little value, if he calls once and, you know, 100 times with nines here, that doesn't really help me compared to the times where, like, you know, we just chop it, or I'm out of the tournament when we both have such a good situation. And the goal was to avoid playing big pots with him. I obviously didn't do that. So, you know, max punish for that, I guess.
There you go. I mean, and maybe like if he sees you call here, that might make him want to bluff you more in the other spots.
Yeah.
If he thinks that like you're not raising because you're afraid of one combo of quads, that guy tends to be a pretty decent guy to run it on for like all their chips.
Yeah.
But what did he end up having in the hand? I forgot what he had.
He had sevens, which like I definitely. I mean, it just again shows like sometimes you like make like I just assumed he would bet a smaller size with those types of hands. So, but
he just thought you were gonna call, man. He thought you were gonna have an ace and you were gonna call him.
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing. If you kind of have a stationary reputation, people definitely make lighter value bets versus you.
Certainly true. I still think you got to put the raising on the river, but you only lose to one combo. I mean,
yeah, I just wanted to, like, I think a lot of people were just like, thought there was literally no reason not to raise, and that I was just like brain farter, or that I was like colluding with Schindler or something. But, you know, I mean, it was just, there was a reason for it, and I wasn't just, you know, just like derping it off there.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying. You don't think he's gonna call it too many hands that, you know, aren't a queen or quads.
Yeah, and there's just a huge, there's, you know, more of an, there's a big ICM tax again when we're facing each other and we're big stacks. So.
Okay, so let's read through a few more of these questions here. Got a series of poor questions, a little bit off topic actually, but guys, today I did get my World Series of Poker third bracelet. I want to show you guys my new bracelet here. Let's see what we got. I think it's got some extra little diamonds in there. I think maybe not. I'm not sure. I can't tell if it's a standard one or not, guys. We did it. I don't know if you can see that. I did it. There we go. It's a thing. 3 of them, Pratt. 3.
It's pretty impressive, man. Like,
I know, but I win 3.
This was the first. Like, this was the first one. I remember you joking about how your first 2 were turbo and tag team, in one case or whatever. And now at least you got a prestigious one, you know.
I know, but anyway, so like someone was saying to me like, "Oh man, like you've already won 3 bracelets. Like you're pretty young. That's awesome." Like, yeah. And then I go to the bracelet ceremony, and goddamn Adrian Mateos is in front of me getting his 3rd bracelet at age 22, and I'm just like, God damn, I can't even be the youngest 3 bracelets in this lineup of 2 people getting their bracelets today.
Yeah, Amadi's the GOAT, man. I think he's great. Like, yeah, it's super impressive how many bracelets or how many wins he has already, and how good he is. But.
Another quick diet question here. So what are some of your favorite meals to prepare?
I really like ribeyes. Like, I used to be a filet guy, but ever since I've gotten into the fattier cuts or whatever, I basically eat a ribeye for dinner most nights. So I would say I'm 5 probably 4 or 5 nights out of the week, I'm eating a ribeye. I really like bacon and eggs after, especially after a workout, to go along with a protein shake. I try to force myself to eat oysters and sardines sometimes just because they're supposed to be good for you, but I really hate them. So that's a tough one. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, my diet is pretty simple. Like, I basically eat the same things almost every day, except for carb night. You know, I eat some sort of meat with eggs and nuts after working out, and then I'll usually eat a dinner that's either a ribeye or sometimes I'll have fish. But it's pretty straightforward and simple. And I mean, I honestly think that this diet is just basically cheating. Like, I eat a steak for dinner most nights of the week, and then once a week I get to eat pasta, and my body looks better, and I like completely change my body composition. Like, it feels like it's cheating, honestly. Like, it's like I think that everyone could basically benefit from it, because I mean, if you're basically rotating between steak and then you have pasta once a week or pizza or whatever you want, it's really not that bad.
Honestly, sounds pretty good to me. I love steak as much as the next guy. Actually, I love it more than the next guy. So maybe that's something I could go for.
Yeah, it's the greatest diet, honestly.
All right, so I think actually we've gone through almost all of these questions, at least the reasonably solid ones, over the course of this pod. We do have another one. So any book recommendation, any books that you've been reading lately that you'd recommend to the good people here?
I mean, I listed a bunch of them on my Twitter at the end of the year. So if you want to like scroll back maybe through my pictures, there's definitely a lot of good ones in there. Lately, the ones that I've really enjoyed, I really liked Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So that was a book I tried when I first tried reading. It was really boring and I couldn't get into it, but I tried it again, and there's some really good philosophy and interesting stuff in there. It's sort of a story, but it also has a lot of philosophy in it. And I really enjoyed that one. And the other one I really enjoyed lately was Sapiens, which is sort of the history of humans, how we came from, you know, being apes all the way to being Homo sapiens. And I think this book is awesome. Like, if you find evolution or anything like that interesting, you'll really enjoy this book. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about why we develop the way we are, and, you know, why humans think the way we do. So.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And if you guys want to follow Pratoush on Twitter, his Twitter handle is just Pratoush Badiga. Overall, pretty solid tweets. Good stuff. Good information. If you want to learn some stuff, Pratoush is a pretty good guy to follow. So what's up next, man? What's up next for you? What's your game plan? What's on the schedule? What's on the docket?
I'm heading back to Vegas on Tuesday, so the 3K 6 Max is on Wednesday. So even before, I was kind of planning on taking this last week off because I wasn't going to play the heads up, and this week was kind of light for World Series. So I wanted to get, you know, some rest at home and, you know, be ready for the rest of the summer. So I'll be back on Tuesday and basically playing whatever the World Series No Limit event is, or Venetians, and I'll be playing, like, you know, as much as I can over the next couple weeks. And then I'll, you know, after the series, I'm actually going to Japan for a trip with my friends for a week, which should be really fun. So I'm really excited for the next couple of months. Like, I think it's gonna be awesome.
Nice. I used to go to Japan every year with Fees and JMO. We would just go and like eat as much sushi as we can, get some good steak. Got some good recommendations there as well. Sushi Dai at the marketplace. You got to go at like 3:30 in the morning, but it's just like top-notch sushi, cheap for some reason. I don't know why. It was also cheap. And you just have to like pack in there, man. It's like 12 seats, and they're built for like, you know, Japanese people because it is in Japan. And like I like take up almost 2. It's great food though. Really an amazing experience going to Japan.
Yeah, I definitely won't be following my diet. Well, I'm just gonna be eating as much food as possible. But
awesome, man. All right. Well, I want to say thanks for having you on today. That's gonna just about do it. Again, if you guys want to check out the Tournament Masterclass from Pratoush, check out upswingpoker.com. Pratoush, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. It was good to be on.
Awesome. All right, guys. See you later.
All right. See ya.